Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. This whole mess started when I finally saved enough to buy my first home after years of renting crappy apartments and eating ramen noodles. The house itself was nothing fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom ranch style, but it had this amazing backyard that sold me instantly. The backyard was huge, maybe half an acre, with this gorgeous mature oak tree right in the center that had to be at least 50 years old. The previous owners had let everything go wild, so it was overgrown with weeds and tall grass, but I could see the potential. I spent hours during the walkthrough imagining weekend barbecues, maybe a vegetable garden, definitely a proper lawn where kids could play. When the survey came back during closing, I noticed something interesting. There was this old, falling apart wire fence along one side of the property, mostly collapsed and buried under vines. But according to the official survey, my property line actually extended about 15 feet beyond where that old fence was. The concrete survey markers were still there at the corners, just barely visible under years of accumulated dirt and vegetation. I figured the previous owners just never bothered to maintain the actual boundaries. No big deal, I thought. More space for me. The first few weeks after moving in were blissful. I was unpacking boxes, getting to know the neighborhood, and planning my backyard project. That's when I met her. She showed up at my door on a Saturday morning with a wobbly-looking lime green Jell-O salad in a disposable aluminum pan. She was probably in her mid-50s, with that kind of aggressively styled blonde hair that screams, "I need to speak to your manager," and was wearing a tracksuit that looked like it cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She introduced herself as the head of the Neighborhood Improvement Committee and went on about how they worked hard to maintain property values and community standards. The way she said it made it sound official, but something felt off about the whole interaction. She made this comment about hoping I wasn't one of those people who let their grass get longer than 2 inches, delivered with this fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. I thanked her for the Jell-O salad and assured her I planned to take good care of my property. She seemed satisfied and left, but I caught her looking back at my backyard with this weird, calculating expression. 3 weeks later, I decided it was time to start the backyard transformation. I hired a local landscaping company to clear out all the overgrown vegetation and till the soil so I could plant new grass. I showed them the survey and pointed out exactly where my property lines were, making sure they understood to work right up to the boundaries. The crew arrived early Monday morning with their equipment. They'd been working for maybe an hour when I heard shouting from outside. I looked out my kitchen window and saw this woman marching across the yard toward the workers, waving her arms around like she was directing traffic. It was the Jell-O lady, and she was clearly upset about something. I went outside to see what was going on. She was standing there telling my landscaping crew they needed to stop working immediately. When she saw me coming, she turned and started lecturing me about how I was destroying community property. She claimed that the 15-foot strip of land where my guys were working wasn't actually mine. According to her, it was some kind of historic neighborhood greenway that she and her committee managed for the community. She pulled out this crumpled piece of paper that looked like someone had drawn a map with colored pencils and insisted it was official documentation. I tried to stay calm and reasonable. I went inside and got my survey documents from closing, the ones with the official seal and everything, and showed them to her. I explained that this was a legal survey done by a licensed professional, and it clearly showed where my property boundaries were. She looked at the survey like I'd handed her a grocery list. She said it was either a forgery or the city had made some kind of mistake years ago that she was personally responsible for fixing. She kept going on about how she'd lived here for 25 years, and that gave her more authority than my piece of paper. The whole conversation was surreal. I'm standing there with official legal documents, and she's waving around what looks like a child's art project, insisting her version was correct. She ended the confrontation by threatening to call the police and sue me for property damage. Then she went to her garage and came back with a bunch of cheap plastic signs that said "Private Committee Property" and started hammering them into the ground along what she claimed was the boundary line. My landscaping crew was standing there looking confused, asking if they should keep working or not. I told them to continue based on the official survey, but they seemed nervous about the whole situation and ended up packing up early. That's when things really started getting crazy. Over the next few days, she began what she called improvements to her claimed greenway. She ripped out the grass seed my crew had planted and put down these ugly patches of sod that didn't match anything else in the area. She installed this wobbly wooden bench that looked like it came from a discount store and a concrete bird bath that immediately started collecting stagnant water and mosquitoes. But the greenway was just the beginning. She used it as a base of operations to terrorize the entire street. There was this older guy who lived 2 houses down who had just built a nice storage shed in his backyard. She started complaining that it was an eyesore from her public greenway and actually reported him to the city for code violations. The poor guy had to hire a lawyer just to prove his shed was legal. She installed these incredibly bright solar-powered motion lights along her fake pathway. These things would light up like a football stadium every time a cat walked by, and they were aimed directly at my bedroom window and the living room of the family on the other side. Try sleeping when random animals are triggering what feels like searchlights outside your window all night. Then she started encouraging local teenagers to use the strip as a shortcut between streets. These kids would walk through throwing trash, playing loud music, and generally making noise right outside my house. When I politely asked some of them to be more careful about the litter, she accused me of harassing minors and threatened to call the police on me. The final straw was when she started holding her committee meetings on that bench every evening right around dinner time. She'd invite 3 or 4 other neighbors, and they'd sit there talking loudly about community business and property values while I was trying to enjoy a quiet meal or put my nephew to bed when he visited. I tried calling the police about the trespassing, but they said it was a civil matter since she claimed it was public land. I contacted a lawyer, but he wanted a $5,000 retainer just to get started, which I definitely couldn't afford after buying the house. That's when I realized something important. If she wanted to insist this land was public, then she was going to have to play by public land rules. I spent an entire weekend at City Hall and online, researching every ordinance and regulation related to public pathways, greenways, and community spaces. I printed out everything I could find about ADA compliance requirements, public liability insurance, sanitation standards, lighting regulations, and rules about unpermitted structures on public property. The research was eye-opening. Public land comes with a lot of requirements that most people never think about. Next, I hired a professional surveying company to come out and do a highly visible survey of my property. These guys showed up with all their equipment and placed tall wooden stakes with bright pink ribbons every 10 feet along my actual property line. You could see those markers from space. There was absolutely no ambiguity about where my land ended and where it didn't. She came storming out of her house when she saw the surveyors working, demanding to know what they were doing. They politely explained they were marking property boundaries and showed her their paperwork. She stood there fuming as they placed marker after marker, each one making it clearer that her greenway was entirely on my property. Then I sat down and wrote her a letter. I made sure to send it certified mail so there would be proof she received it. The tone was professionally cooperative, thanking her for taking such an active interest in maintaining public spaces in our neighborhood. I explained that since she insisted the land was a public greenway, I felt obligated as a responsible citizen to make sure it met all applicable city codes and safety requirements. I attached a detailed list of everything that needed to be corrected within 14 days. The entire pathway needed to be properly paved and wheelchair accessible according to ADA standards. This would require concrete work, proper grading, and handrails, probably costing tens of thousands of dollars. Her bench and bird bath were not commercial-grade equipment approved for public use and posed safety and liability risks. They had to be removed immediately. The solar lights violated the city's light pollution ordinance and had to be taken down. As someone managing public use land, she needed to provide proof of a $2 million public liability insurance policy, which is standard for this type of situation. I explained that failure to comply within the specified time frame would require me to report the violations to code enforcement, the planning department, and the city attorney's office. I was really proud of that letter. It was polite, factual, and completely reasonable if you accepted her premise that this was public land. She ignored it completely. 15 days later, nothing had changed. The bench was still there, the lights were still blinding everyone, and she was still holding her evening meetings. So I made the phone calls. The response was swift and beautiful. Code enforcement showed up first. The inspector took one look at the unpermitted bench, the improper lighting, and the signs claiming public ownership of private property, and wrote her a citation on the spot. The fine was substantial enough that she definitely noticed. The planning department sent her an official cease and desist letter explaining that no public greenway existed at that location and that her claims were fraudulent. They warned her about potential legal action if she continued misrepresenting public property. But the real fireworks came when she called an emergency neighborhood committee meeting to rally support against what she called harassment from me. I decided to attend this meeting. She set it up in the community center and maybe a dozen neighbors showed up. She spent 20 minutes ranting about how I was trying to destroy neighborhood property values and community spirit. She painted herself as a victim of legal bullying and encouraged everyone to stand together against outside interference. When she finally finished her speech, I stood up and asked if I could respond. I had prepared copies of everything for anyone who wanted to see them. The original survey from my closing, the new survey with the visible markers, the certified letter I'd sent her, the official response from the city planning department, the paid citation from code enforcement. I calmly walked through the timeline of events explaining how she had claimed authority over land that legally belonged to me, installed unpermitted structures, and created nuisances that affected multiple neighbors. That's when other people started speaking up. The guy with the storage shed talked about how she'd reported him to the city for no reason and cost him hundreds in legal fees. The family whose living room was being lit up by her motion sensors explained how it was affecting their kids' sleep. Another neighbor mentioned how the teenagers she encouraged to use the pathway had been leaving trash and making noise. It was like a dam burst. Person after person stood up with stories about how she had been bullying them or creating problems in the name of community improvement. The meeting that was supposed to rally support for her turned into a complete revolt. By the end, they had voted her out as head of the committee and appointed someone else to take over. The aftermath was incredibly satisfying. She had to pay the fines from code enforcement. More importantly, she had to come onto my property, under my supervision, to remove all her illegal installations. I watched from my back door as she angrily dismantled her bench, hauled away her mosquito-breeding bird bath, and took down her ridiculous lights. I ended up taking her to small claims court for the cost of the new survey and the landscaping repairs from where she'd ripped up my grass seed. The judge ruled in my favor without much deliberation, and she had to pay me back every penny. I used some of that money toward building a beautiful 6-foot cedar privacy fence along that side of my property. The fence company was very careful to place it exactly on the property line marked by those pink survey ribbons. Last weekend, I hosted a barbecue for all the neighbors who had been supportive during this whole mess. We had a great time in my now private and peaceful backyard, grilling burgers under that beautiful oak tree I'd fallen in love with originally. I could see her through her kitchen window glaring at us from behind her blinds. The sight of her angry face just made the victory sweeter. Looking back on everything, I realized that her reign of terror over the neighborhood wasn't ended by yelling or fighting or expensive lawyers. It was ended by the very rules and regulations she tried to twist for her own benefit. She built her own cage with all her claims about public land and community authority, and I just handed her the key. The best part is that the whole street is finally quiet. No more emergency committee meetings about grass length or shed colors. No more teenagers cutting through people's yards because she told them it was okay. No more blindingly bright lights going off all night. Sometimes the most effective way to deal with a bully isn't to fight them on their terms. Sometimes you just have to make them live by the rules they claim to represent. My backyard looks amazing now, by the way. The new grass came in perfectly, and I've started planting that vegetable garden I always wanted. Every time I sit under my oak tree with a cold beer, watching my neighbors enjoy their peaceful yards, I remember that sometimes good things happen to good people who refuse to be pushed around. And every time I see her peeking through those blinds, I smile and wave. Edit. A lot of people have been asking about the committee and whether it was real. From what I understand, it was a completely informal group of neighbors who got together occasionally to discuss community issues. There was nothing official about it, no legal authority, and definitely no power to claim public ownership of private property. She basically made herself the leader of a social club and then tried to act like she was some kind of elected official. Edit 2. Someone asked what happened to all those teenagers who were using the pathway. Once the fence went up and she stopped encouraging them to cut through, they found other routes. Amazing how that works when someone isn't actively directing trespassers onto your property. Edit 3. Yes, I still have that Jell-O dish. I keep meaning to return it, but honestly, after everything that happened, I think I've earned a piece of kitchenware as a trophy. Update, 6 months later. Holy cow, I didn't expect my original post to blow up like it did. A lot of people asked for an update, so here's what's happened since I put up that fence and thought everything was over. Spoiler alert, it wasn't over. About 2 months after the barbecue, I started noticing weird things happening around my property. My garbage cans would be knocked over on pickup day, but only mine on the whole street. Someone kept leaving dog poop bags on my front porch, even though I don't have a dog. My morning newspaper would mysteriously disappear, but my neighbors on both sides were still getting theirs. At first, I thought it might be random vandalism or maybe some kids being jerks. But then I installed a security camera system after my garden hose got slashed one night, and I guess who showed up on the footage? Yep, her. At 2 a.m., tiptoeing around my yard like some kind of suburban ninja, moving my trash cans and generally being a nuisance. I took the footage to the police, and this time they took it seriously since I had clear evidence of trespassing and vandalism. They paid her a visit and gave her an official warning. She tried to claim she was just checking on community property maintenance standards. But that excuse didn't fly when she was literally caught on camera dumping coffee grounds on my driveway. The police officer who handled it told me later that she spent 20 minutes trying to convince him that my security cameras were somehow illegal because they could see part of the street. He had to explain to her multiple times that people are allowed to have security systems on their own property. After the police warning, things were quiet for about a month. I thought maybe she'd finally gotten the message and would leave me alone. Then the really crazy stuff started. I came home from work one day to find a for sale sign in my front yard. Not my actual realtor's sign, just some random sign she'd apparently gotten from somewhere. When I called the number on it, it went to a disconnected voicemail. A few days later, I got a call from the city asking about my application to demolish my house and build a commercial parking lot. I had to go down to City Hall with my ID and explain that I never submitted any such application. Turns out someone had forged paperwork using my name and address. The handwriting analysis they did later confirmed it was her, and she ended up getting charged with filing false documents. But the absolute craziest thing happened about a month ago. I was working in my backyard on a Saturday morning, planting some new shrubs along the fence line, when I heard this mechanical whirring sound. I looked up and saw a small drone hovering over my yard, clearly recording everything I was doing. At first I thought it might be some kid playing with a new toy, but this thing was flying in a very deliberate pattern, like someone was conducting surveillance. It would hover in one spot for a while, then move to another area and hover some more. I went inside and got my phone to record the drone, and that's when I saw her standing in her backyard with a remote control, piloting this thing around my property. I walked over to the fence and told her she needed to stop flying her drone over my yard immediately. She claimed she was documenting illegal modifications to community green space and had every right to gather evidence. I reminded her that a judge had already ruled there was no community green space on my property and that she was trespassing in my airspace. She said airspace laws didn't apply to concerned citizens monitoring environmental violations. This woman really thought she was some kind of environmental police officer. I called the cops again, and while I was waiting for them to arrive, her drone suddenly crashed in my backyard. Apparently she got so worked up arguing with me that she forgot to pay attention to her flying and ran it straight into my oak tree. When the police showed up, they found her in my yard trying to retrieve the crashed drone. She was literally on my property without permission, which made their job pretty easy. They arrested her on the spot for criminal trespassing. The drone incident was apparently the last straw for everyone involved. The prosecutor decided to pursue charges for the ongoing harassment pattern, including the vandalism, the forged city documents, and now the trespassing and illegal surveillance. Her lawyer tried to work out some kind of plea deal, but she refused to admit any wrongdoing. She insisted in court that she was protecting community interests and that I was somehow the real criminal for destroying neighborhood character. The judge was not impressed with her defense strategy. She ended up getting sentenced to 6 months probation, community service, and had to pay restitution for all the damage she'd caused. More importantly, the judge issued a permanent restraining order requiring her to stay at least 100 feet away from my property at all times. But here's the really satisfying part. The stress of all the legal proceedings apparently convinced her husband that it was time for a change of scenery. About 3 weeks ago, I saw a moving truck in their driveway. She's gone. They sold the house and moved somewhere else. I have no idea where, and frankly, I don't care as long as it's far away from here. The new neighbors who bought her house are a lovely young couple with a toddler. They introduced themselves by bringing over homemade cookies instead of weird Jell-O salad, which I took as a good sign. When they asked about the neighborhood, I gave them the whole story about my previous neighbor situation. They thanked me for being honest and said they'd make sure to respect property boundaries. It's amazing how peaceful the street has become. No more emergency committee meetings, no more drama about grass length or shed colors, no more surveillance drones or mysterious vandalism. I finished my backyard project this spring, and it turned out even better than I'd imagined. The vegetable garden is producing amazing tomatoes and peppers. The new lawn is thick and green. I added a small patio area under the oak tree where I can sit and read in the evenings. Last weekend I hosted another neighborhood barbecue, and even more people came than last time. Everyone kept commenting on how nice and quiet things have been lately. Someone asked if I missed having the entertainment of dealing with neighborhood drama. I told them the only drama I want in my backyard is whether my tomatoes will be ready for the next barbecue. The best part is that the whole experience taught me a lot about standing up for myself and not backing down when someone tries to bully you with fake authority. A lot of people face situations with entitled neighbors or HOA bullies who think they can push others around with made-up rules and imaginary power. Sometimes the solution isn't to fight fire with fire, but to fight fire with the actual rulebook. When someone claims to have authority they don't really have, make them prove it through official channels. When they insist on playing by certain rules, hold them accountable to those same rules. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, karma comes with a moving truck. I still have that original Jell-O dish, by the way. I've been using it as a planter for herbs on my kitchen windowsill. Every time I see it, I remember that first day when I thought she was just a quirky neighbor bringing a welcome gift. Now it holds my basil plants, and they're thriving. Final edit. Thank you to everyone who followed this saga and offered support and advice along the way. A lot of people shared their own neighbor horror stories, and it's both comforting and terrifying to know how common these situations are. For anyone dealing with similar issues, document everything, know your property boundaries, understand your local ordinances, and don't let bullies wear you down with fake authority. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well in your own space. And maybe invest in some security cameras early on. You never know when you might need footage of your neighbor being a suburban ninja at 2 a.m. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I don't know whether this counts as a pro-revenge, but here's my story, which happened some years ago. I, 26F at the time, had just started dating Thomas, 28M, and things seemed promising. Very sweet man, educated and quite smart, good looks. After 7 weeks of dating, he invited me and 2 of his childhood friends, let's call them Alex and Bart, for a long 29th birthday celebration weekend at his father's country house in a small French town. His father was going to be around as well, and I was very excited to meet everyone. Day 1, Friday, is fun. I am happy to get along well with Thomas's father, a smart and caring man. Day 2, Saturday. After a very nice day, we enjoy a party in the garden with the neighbors, including some friends of Thomas. After a few hours and lots of drinks, a group of people gather around a small campfire and start sharing childhood memories. This is where things go wrong. At first, of course, innocent and dumb stories, as you would expect, but then Thomas and his friends started sharing really sick stuff. In particular, they told a story about how, when they were 14 or 15 years old, they found very amusing to bully for almost 6 months Arthur, a boy of their school who was very isolated and shy, making jokes, calling names, you name it. As if this was not enough, they created a fake girl profile on MSN Messenger, a computer platform to exchange live messages that we used in years 2000s, and spent seeking months exchanging messages with him under the false girl identity, flirting and developing a false relationship with the poor boy. Some people were in the confidence at school, and it became a big and cruel joke behind Arthur's back. They used pictures of Bart's real cousin, and the boy truly thought he had some kind of online girlfriend to whom he even sent confessions and love messages. At some point, they got bored and scheduled a false rendezvous IRL, asking the boy to take a bus for 2 or 3 hours, wearing a shirt Elmer the Elephant, based on a private joke. Obviously, there was no one waiting for him, and they did not know how long he waited over there, by himself. If Arthur had not already understood what was going on, he found out the next day at school after Thomas and Bart told the story to everyone and even shared the love messages that Arthur had been writing. The poor boy stopped coming to class and apparently changed school, and it is easy to imagine that this must have been extremely traumatizing to him. Do you think that Thomas, Alex, and Bart had any bit of shame about it? Not a bit of remorse in particular on Thomas and Bart's side. They kept making jokes about it and even seemed to regret that they were not good enough at being evil to convince the boy to send nudes or sexy pics. I don't even want to imagine what would have happened if he had done so. To say that I felt uncomfortable would be a gross understatement. I was absolutely horrified and started to despise Thomas more than anything. I was not the only one shocked. Thomas's father, who heard the end of the story, had the most disappointed look in the eyes. His stupid son was so drunk that he did not even notice it. I escaped the party immediately after that and got back to the house. I could not sleep at all this night, and I kept thinking about the evening and how Thomas was still finding this funny. I heard him coming to bed around 4 a.m., but I pretended I was asleep. Day 3, Sunday, was the actual birthday, and the initial plan was that I would take Thomas on a one fancy surprise date for lunch nearby, and then we would meet the group for a late afternoon party. But instead, I woke up very early on Sunday morning, took all my stuff in silence, and went alone to the train station where I took a direct train heading back to Paris. I decided to send a text to Thomas, wishing him happy birthday and telling him to meet me at a certain location 1 hour from the house for a surprise, and that I needed to go a little bit in advance to make sure that everything would be perfect. I had picked the location randomly, using Google Maps to gain time. Thomas read the text around 10 a.m. when he woke up. He responded with excitement that he would follow religiously the instructions. When he arrived there at 12:30, I told him to wait further as there was little delay on something. Then I asked him to meet me at a restaurant which was 30 minutes drive from the initial location. When he arrived at 13:15, I texted him that I was on my way, would arrive in 20 minutes, and that he will understand when he sees me why I made him wait. I also asked him to order some food and the most expensive bottle on the menu. Around 13:30, he started calling me several times and sent a lot of worried texts, and after 45 minutes, I responded in French. So how does it feel to have people play with your feelings? Then I stopped responding. I let him call and text the entire afternoon, but never responded. At some point, an unknown number called me. It was his friend Alex asking what was going on and that Thomas' birthday was completely ruined because of what I did. I just responded, "This is an extremely small payback for what you did to Arthur. Tell Thomas to stop calling me." And hung up. I blocked them. I still felt bad the entire evening as I had started to grow attached to Thomas back then. The following days, a common friend called me to say that my reaction was completely absurd and unfair, that it was not my role to punish someone for actions they did as a teenager, that they were adult ways of saying things, and that I had been completely crazy. Only a few people supported what I did. Everyone else seemed to think that I was an idiot. Thomas tried to fix things and win me back for a few months afterwards. I never responded to any of his messages. I don't regret it. I simply hope that Arthur, who should be 35 or 36 years old now, is well. Edits. I really did not expect so many reactions and comments. As expected, I see that not everyone approves what I did, but I am surprised to receive so many kind messages. Thank you. About Thomas's father. He was actually one of the few people understanding my actions. He called me shortly after the incident to discuss an unrelated topic. I was to give him a list of recommendations about something, and was already aware of everything. He did not badmouth his son, but I could really feel that he was disappointed. He simply told me that he had not found sleep the night of Saturday to Sunday because of what he had heard during the party. He told me he appreciated meeting me, and expressed regret that I was not with his son anymore, but also said that he understood my reasons. He did not try to convince me to get back with Thomas. This man was truly a gentleman. I don't know what became of Arthur. I don't even know his last name. I think that even if I had known his name, I would not have reached out to him by fear of making him remember things that he probably wants to forget. I hope he is a confident man, and that he still likes Elmer the elephant. The next one is an entitled people story. During my time working at a very popular theme park in Florida, a magical rat planet of sorts, I did multiple college internships. These internships were paid and came with housing. Rent was automatically deducted from our weekly checks. At the time, there were 4 apartment complexes, with one being dedicated to foreign college workers. Unfortunately, unless there were special circumstances such as height or medical restrictions, we all had to share rooms with one other individual. One particular internship, I lived in a 3-bedroom with my then best friend as my roommate and 4 other young women. One was an American of East Asian descent and culture, and the other was from East Asia and was studying in the States. The third, who I still speak to today, is also East Asian but was adopted by American parents. Then there was the oldest roommate, a woman I'll call Alina, fake name, who was in her 30s. Alina was instantly judgmental of my dolled-up looks and proper speech. She was also rude to the other roommates, especially the one I still speak with who shared her room. She told her and her parents as they unpacked that she wasn't going to mother her when she found out she was in her early 20s. Alina often made racist comments whenever she heard our one roommate speak Mandarin loudly on the phone. Alina was very weird and didn't seem to work that much, but I believe that was the nature of her particular job. She didn't bathe regularly and smelled different. She would stay out all day and come back home from sweating, sit on the sofa, and go right to bed in her street clothes, no shower. Her room smelled like feet and armpit juice, and her roommate found it hard to breathe. She also would eat and leave her unwashed dishes on the counter and in the sink. Once she left her pot in the sink until it grew mold. She knew eventually one of us would clean it up. She had a disagreement with her roommate and started sleeping on the sofa. Since she didn't work as much as the rest of us, she was always there. The sofa started stinking as well as the living room. We couldn't bring people over anymore because of the situation. We also had nowhere to sit. She was kind of aggressive and the other roommates were intimidated, so I spoke to her. I told her the living room wasn't her private bedroom but a shared space and that she needed to move back to her room. She said she didn't feel comfortable in there anymore. I was unsympathetic as she was the one making everyone uncomfortable. She treated everyone like maids. She didn't even help clean their shared bathroom or buy tissue. Thank God I had the room with the private bathroom I shared with one other person. Eventually, the other girls started taking their roll of tissue in and out the bathroom as they used it. I also purchased a separate set of cookware to use in the kitchen and placed it in my room after each use and wash. Alina didn't like these changes and said she didn't feel welcomed anymore and decided to put in an apartment transfer. No one shed a tear. It took a couple of weeks, but she was moved to another apartment complex. My roommates and I deep cleaned the sofa and kitchen to get the funk out. Alina continued to believe she was a victim of mistreatment. Anyway, thank you for watching.